Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this World of Warcraft raiding guide, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the 10-man heroic mode version of Garalon in the Heart of Fear raid. In order to complete this fight we used 1 tank, 3 healers and 6 DPS. It's preferable that one of your DPS has some form of soaking ability. In this video we used a rogue. So as always we're going to first take a look at the list of the boss's abilities, and once I've listed the abilities I will then go into how we actually defeated this encounter, got 10 achievement points and some epic loot. Garalon's first ability goes by the name of Furious Swipe, and this is a frontal cone ability that will inflict 400,000 physical damage. Now if Garalon fails to hit at least 2 targets with his Furious Swipe, he will gain a buff to himself which is called Fury, and this will increase his damage dealt by 10% and his movement speed by 10% for 30 seconds, and this is a stacking effect. Now the soaking of the Furious Swipe is where you need your tank and your soaking DPSer to obviously soak the swipe damage. If you do miss the odd 1 or 2 swipe soaks because the boss might randomly turn or something along those lines, then it doesn't matter, just don't let him constantly miss 2 people. Otherwise the damage output is going to become too high and obviously he's going to move a hell of a lot faster. You could opt to use 2 tanks for this if your DPS gear isn't on par really and they can't really soak the damage too well, but obviously that will decrease the overall output damage onto the boss and it will take you longer to kill him in the long run. Garalon's second ability goes by the name of Crush, and as you can see by that lovely red skull there from the dungeon journal, this ability can be very deadly. In fact, this ability can cause your raid to wipe if you're not very careful. So throughout the fight, Garalon will crush people. This is where he'll lift his massive body up into the air and then pretty much do a WWE style body slam on the ground, and this will inflict 250,000 physical damage to everyone in the raid. Now anyone that's standing within 14 yards of Garalon will take an extra 800,000 physical damage. Now you can see where to stand really because there's a little purple circle around the bottom of the boss. Just avoid that at all times throughout the fight and you will be fine. However, if someone does happen to stand in it, Garalon will also cast an additional crush, which will also kill you if you're standing in the circle, and if you're not it will just do the normal damage. You don't want to have any additional crushes cast throughout this fight because your healers will be moaning at you and will eventually slap you across the face. Garalon's next ability, and what is probably the most important ability throughout this whole fight, goes by the name of Pheromones. Now, this is what will cause Garalon to fixate on a certain player, and Pheromones will initially be cast on the first person to attack the boss or whoever is in front of him. So, at the start of the fight, we get our tank to take the Pheromones debuff, and this will inflict 20,000 periodic nature damage to all players, and it will also apply the pungency debuff. The pungency debuff will render the player extra pungent, and this will increase the pheromone damage by 10% for 2 minutes. This is a stacking effect, bear that in mind. The player will also leave a pheromone trail behind them, which will inflict 100,000 nature damage to anyone that is standing within 4 yards of the pheromone trail. And as you can see in the video in the background, these are the little lightly coloured bright blobs that are all around the room. You want to leave a nice neat trail of these around the room because obviously people can't stand in them by accident then and take extra damage. Now when it comes to the pheromones debuff itself, we had a rotation set up so that in phase 1 we had the tank to start off with taking 25 stacks of pheromones and then everyone else taking 20 stacks. Now then, going into phase 2, we had the healers taking the pheromones debuff stacks and obviously trailing the pheromone trail around the room because you want all of your DPS to be focusing on the boss because it's like a mini enrage when he hits 35%, and we'll talk a bit more about that later on. Just bear in mind that the trail does need to be kited outside the room as best as possible in order to make for a very clean kill. Garalon's next ability is less of an ability and more of a body part, and that does sound quite weird. So Garalon's legs can be attacked separately from his body, and if your melee DPS or your ranged DPS are standing within a very close proximity to Garalon's legs, it will allow them to increase the damage dealt to the leg by 100%. Now this weak point can be found just by standing in the little green circle that is around the leg of the boss. Now breaking one of Garalon's legs will cause him to damage himself for 3% of his maximum health. This will also reduce his movement speed by 15%, and this can stack up to 4 times. However, throughout the fight he can mend his legs, which will restore it back to full health. Now what we did is we had the melee DPS attacking the legs, while the ranged DPS attacked the main body part of the boss. Now if you have your melee on the legs, you want them to aim to be killing one of the legs just as the next one respawns. And also your melee can spread dots to different legs and also go for the legs that might be hard to reach for the melee DPS. By doing this, you should be able to output full effective DPS throughout the legs and onto the main body, and hopefully reduce the length of the encounter significantly. And the boss's final ability goes by the name of Damaged, and as you can see from that nice little skull icon, this is a heroic only mode ability. So when the boss hits 33% remaining health, he will kind of have a very soft end rage, but it will hurt you quite a bit. So when he does hit 33% health, he will no longer care about the pheromones. However, you still do need to take care of them as a raid, and as I said earlier, when we hit this phase, we had our 3 healers take care of the pheromones so that the DPS can have full uptime on the boss. So this is the phase when you need a proper tank, because he ignores the pheromones and he will fixate on his tank, and throughout the period of phase 3, Garalon will increase his damage, and he will also gain a very big speed increase, which will hurt your raid. Well, it'll hurt your tank a lot more than your raid, but his damage to the raid will also be slightly higher. So phase 3, you just need to heal like you've never healed before. And that's it, that's this encounter. It's relatively hard if your healers aren't well geared, but it's doable. It's very doable. So as always, thank you for watching, and if you're interested in future Mr. Pandaria raiding guides, then please do feel free to subscribe to the channel.